Okay, our speaker today is Judy Holstein. Judy taught high school English, speech, and drama, and later trained to become a registered drama therapist. She worked with people from 3 to 98 years old using therapeutic creative arts and was director of adult day programs for CJE Senior Life. She now serves on the board of directors of the Institute for Therapy through the Arts. Please welcome Judy Holstein.
On Memorial Day, we're in the midst of, which we celebrated a month ago. We had an important reminder. And now we're in the midst of the 4th of July celebration, made all the more significant because this year is America's 250th celebration of our democracy. Well, as a child, I used to chant, "It's a free country," if and when someone challenged the way I talked or what I said or what I thought or what I did. Yes, I took that freedom for granted. But many have fought and died in wars and in civil rights battles to ensure and secure that freedom for our own country as well as other countries beyond our borders. And 6 weeks ago on Memorial Day, we were reminded that we should remember those who served in past and current wars. Well, I didn't need to be reminded. My father, Sam Lesner, was drafted 1 month before his 35th birthday in 1944. He served 2 years in England, France, and Belgium, and he did arrive home safely on the 2nd birthday of his daughter in September of 1945. Boxes of letters that he wrote to our mother from February of 44 through September of 45 remained hidden away and apparently forgotten. My sister found them more than 60 years later, and they were neatly bound, chronologically ordered. My father, like most soldiers, had never talked about his war experience. But opening the box was the start of an adventure of connections. And reconnections with our parents, our late parents, as we plunged into devouring this war story, the firsthand eyewitness account of the life of a Jewish soldier proudly serving in the United States Army in Europe to defend America and its European allies against the horrors of Nazism, despite enduring the separation from his wife and brand new baby. His letters described his unit's Normandy landing in September on Labor Day 1944, of course, after D-Day. He landed, or his unit landed, on Utah Beach, the one on the farthest left. And he wrote to describe that experience. And while I talk about or read his words, I'll flip through some other slides that I obtained at the World War II Museum in New Orleans, which is an incredible place and now houses my father's entire archives of his war experience. He wrote, "After a wet night, the sun promises to break through and dry out our pup tents in a grassy meadow somewhere in France, a meadow which not long ago was a battlefield. Several days ago, we left England from the manner in which we were housed and moved to a port where we boarded a splendid ship in which to make the Channel crossing. I imagine the details of the crossing are still a military secret. But I believe I can say that sometime later we climbed down the side of the ship, jumped into a huge landing barge, and rowed to shore in a stinging ray of sea salt. The barge rode right onto the beach, and we piled out into a scene of desolation that would do justice to a DeMille movie. The ship, the barge, the beach, still showing signs of a great struggle, and the extraordinary peace and quiet that now blanket this scene. Nowhere is there a sign of war, only the scars of war. Cows are pasturing, berries are ripening. On the hedgerows that once were barriers between enemy and allies, and farmers are slowly taking possession of their lands again. You must bear in mind, Angel, that many women, nurses, Red Cross workers in wax, are going through exactly the same motions that I am. They climbed down the same barge and the same ladder on the ship's side. They rode the same waves. They struggled up the same beach. They didn't trudge the 5.5 miles of tortuous terrain to our campsite as we did, but in all other things, they faced the rugged life that we do. A memorable day in our lives will be Labor Day, September 4th, the day we hit the beach in France and made a successful landing. And this picture we took last year when Bob and I traveled there to visit the beaches of Normandy, and that is Omaha Beach, with the memorial left there on the sand. 1 year ago, on the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, Bob and I took a river cruise on the Seine, beginning in Paris and taking us to the Normandy beaches. I stood on Utah Beach, where my father's September 5th, 1944 letter to my mother described his landing. The night before our river cruise passengers made the excursion to visit Omaha and Utah Beach, our cruise director spoke about what the next day's experiences would be all about. I asked him if I could add some of my own remarks. At the end of his, I spoke to the passengers and added my personal comments about the emotional impact of making this trip, to learn, to pay respects to all the soldiers, and to honor my father. Culminating the tour of the beaches the next day was the visit to the World War II Memorial Cemetery. Our group had a private time to visit the cemetery. Then we were brought to the memorial statue, where a young French military officer conducted a solemn ceremony. He began by expressing, on behalf of France, the lasting gratitude for Americans and allies who saved France and won the war for all of Europe. He then played the U.S. national anthem on the loudspeaker while we all stood in silence. Our cruise director then stepped forward and handed me a wreath, saying, "Please lay the wreath on behalf of all of us." I walked forward, approached the white three-legged empty stand, and as I placed the wreath in its rightful spot, my lips parted to say, "Thank you, Daddy." On September 15th, 1944, 2 weeks after landing in France and setting up the 130th General Hospital, to which my father would be assigned as a medic for the remainder of the war, he wrote a letter to his daughter Roberta for her first birthday. This is a picture before he left for Europe, when my mother was able to come and visit him at his, what's it called when you train, the base that he,
Basic training.
Basic, thank you. And she brought the baby. So that was his last time seeing this very young child, and then he shipped out. He wrote on her first birthday, "My darling daughter, just a year ago today, at almost the exact time of this writing, I was told that you were born, a healthy, lovely girl child. To the doctor and the world in general, the birth of another child was a routine thing. But for me, your arrival was the hand of God, bestowing upon your mother and me a gift, the most precious that man can receive. I know you are having a birthday party, and I'm sure a wonderful cake. I shall have my sweets too, darling. I shall eat a dish of fine blackberries, which I picked this morning. I picked them because they symbolize more than the sweets for your party. The berry bushes conceal the foxholes in which men fought and died for our wonderful country. They were hard and green when those brave men crouched in their holes and tossed death at the enemy. But even as they knew these bushes would bear rich fruit, so did they know their heroic efforts would bring victory, which is so near for us. Thus it will be through our lives. We will find the sweets of life only through first winning the battles of life. I'm not sad today, little darling. I am lonely, and my own battle may be a long one, but I know when it is won, I'll find a double measure of sweets awaiting me, you and your mother. The day is ending as my daughter's natal day should, beautifully. Good night, my lovely daughter. God bless you and your mother, Daddy." Needless to say, when my sister reread that in 2012, when she discovered the letters, can you imagine what that meant to her? Because she had never even known there was such a thing as that letter. In his book, The Greatest Generation, Tom Brokaw wrote of his firsthand emotional experience of visiting Normandy beaches in 1994 on the 50th anniversary of D-Day. He wrote, "I underwent a life-changing experience. As I walked the beaches with the American veterans who had landed there and now returned for this anniversary, men in their 60s and 70s, and listened to their stories in the cafes and the inns, I was deeply moved and profoundly grateful for all they had done. I realized they had been around me always as I was growing up, and that I had failed to appreciate what they had been through and what they had accomplished. These men and women came of age in the Great Depression, when economic despair hovered over the land like a plague, when Pearl Harbor made it irrefutably clear that America was not a fortress. This generation was summoned to the parade ground and told to train for war. They answered the call to help save the world from the two most powerful and ruthless military machines ever assembled, instruments of conquests in the hands of fascists. They faced great odds and a late start, but they did not protest. When the war was over, the men and women who had been involved in uniform and in civilian capacities joined in joyous and short-lived celebrations, and then immediately began the task of rebuilding their lives and the world they wanted. They were mature beyond their years, tempered by what they had been through, disciplined by their military training. They married in record numbers and gave birth to another distinctive generation, the baby boomers. Anybody with me on that? Okay. They stayed true to their values of personal responsibility, duty, honor, and faith. They were proud of what they accomplished, but they rarely discussed their experiences, even with each other. They became once again ordinary people, the kind of men and women who always have been the foundation of the American way of life. Tom Brokaw. Well, my father was assigned to the 130th General Hospital as a medic. Kind of strange because his background in his career up to his 35th birthday was as a journalist, no medical training. His first assignment as a medic was to the dental clinic. He thinks that was because his wife's father was a dentist. Go figure. And then he was assigned to manage the psychiatric ward, where shell-shocked soldiers would be treated and returned to combat. Now I'm wondering why they assigned him to the psychiatric ward. Well, we'll figure that out someday. 2 weeks before the Christmas Battle of the Bulge, December of 1944, he wrote, "What is this thing that has come over me? After all these months of despair and loneliness, I've found myself. The suffering and pain of others has made me realize my lot is not a bad one. I know that someday I'll be able to say to myself, 'Little man, you've been through some busy days, but you've done a good job.' May God grant that all these boys will live to return to their homes." And he's referring to the beds. My father never spoke about his war experiences, and we never knew about the letters, but we found the box. We read all the letters, and in 2018, my sister and I published the book, Somewhere in Europe, the World War II Letters of Sam Lesner, so the stories could be told and shared. We then revised and published the second edition last year. In fact, what happened at that point was we had no intention of writing a book or publishing a book. We just read the letters, got them all digitized. There are thousands, over 1,000 letters, and put them on a flash drive and sent them to the grandchildren. That was our idea of saving and sharing what their great-grandfather had done. And their immediate response was, "This has to be in a book. You have to share this." And so we set out to do that. The image of a bridge comes to mind as I think and feel about the connections that I've experienced. Finding the letters led my sister and me to form a uniquely strong bond as we worked together to publish this book. Together, our shared childhood memories reconnected us to our parents and the home they created in post-war world of hope and promise. Other very special connections were made in the process of editing as we reached out for others' input. We wrote to a publisher for permission to use maps and a comprehensive description of the Normandy landings and Battle of the Bulge, both of which had affected our father. We found this material in a scholarly book entitled The Illustrated History of World War II by John Ray. The response we received from the publisher told us, "We no longer have the rights to that publication. It's no longer in print." Undaunted, we asked if the publisher could at least contact the author on our behalf to let him know we were seeking permission. They actually did it. And we received a heartfelt, handwritten letter from England from Dr. John Ray. In response to our request, I'd like to quote his letter. "Dear Roberta Bernstein and Judy Holstein, at once I give you permission to use material from my book, The Daily Telegraph History of the Second World War. Let me tell you why. I'm now an old man, aged 88. This means that I lived in southern England throughout the war, experiencing the results of Dunkirk, the Battle of Britain, the Night Blitz, flying bombs and V-2 rockets. I've always studied and taught history. It was obvious at the time that we could not have stayed in the war, let alone been on the winning side, without the intervention of the USA. Therefore, I owe a great debt to American soldiers like your father. They were such generous men. May you have great success with your intervention into the difficult world of publishing. Very best wishes. Sincerely yours, John Ray." Well, we included his scholarly material. We sent him a first draft and a final edition, and his correspondence continued. "Thank you for sending me a draft of your forthcoming book. I am pleased to recommend it to any student of the Second World War. Wartime armies are like pyramids. A great deal is written and remembered by those at the top, but little is recollected by those at the base. Yet their stories are often fascinating and worthy of reading. And for all Jewish men who served in the Allied armies, there was an extra reason for them to fight. That was the knowledge of the Holocaust and what Nazism intended for all Jews. Your father was an exemplar of a Jewish man's response to the call of duty." Well, on a trip to England, my husband and I contacted Dr. Ray to say we'd be in London. He and his wife replied immediately, inviting us to tea at their home. A 1-hour train ride outside of London. We spent a memorable afternoon in their sunny garden, connecting our worlds and our histories and ourselves across a new bridge of friendship. I continue to send birthday greetings annually to Dr. Ray. He's in his mid-90s. One more of my favorite stories of connection blossomed through all the stages of preparing the book to be published. My sister noted the name of a family my father wrote about in Belgium. He met the Hananias, Elias and Rose, in 1945 while enjoying some few days of leave. They lived in Brussels, and he was stationed nearby. They welcomed the American soldier and his buddy as the two walked in their town. Their hospitality extended beyond first meeting. They invited the soldiers to return, to rest, eat, enjoy sitting in their garden, and in fact, to sleep over when they could enjoy extended leave time. My father learned that Elias had a brother who had left Belgium at age 18 to go to Chicago to become a doctor. The two brothers had corresponded through the years, but had never seen one another. The doctor lived with his family near Hyde Park, right where our mother was living with her parents while her husband was overseas. My father included Dr. Shannon's Chicago address in one of his letters and asked my mother to introduce herself and tell the story of her husband's connection to Elias and Rose. My sister read this in his letters and thought, I know a Bob Shannon. He lives in Hyde Park. He's a member of my synagogue. I wonder if the name's a coincidence. She called her friend Bob and told him what she had read in our father's letters, and he said, Elias is my great uncle, Dr. Shannon is my grandfather. What a bridge was this, linking 1945 to 2014, linking a Belgian family to a Hyde Park, Chicago family, linking a dear friend of our father's to friends of my sister, and ultimately extending that bridge. When we did a book talk at Rodephi Zedek, her synagogue, Bob Shannon attended, and he added some remarks of his own about what he learned about his Belgian family because of the letters. And he brought his brother Mitchell to the talk. Well, it turned out that Mitchell was a member of my synagogue in Evanston, JRC. And so when we did our book talk at JRC, Mitchell joined us and reflected on the serendipitous connections between our families. My husband Bob and I now count Mitchell and his husband Bruce among our very dearest friends. They provided us with this photograph of Rose and Elias in the center at their own wedding. My personal and emotional and physical journey to Normandy had yet one more episode to come unexpectedly. Bob and I added 4 more days in Paris on our own after the cruise ended. We thought those days would be primarily sightseeing and enjoying the beauty of Paris. But as we came up from the subway, we stood on the sidewalk consulting our street map to decide which way to turn to go to our destination, the Jacquemart-André Museum. Well, a Parisian gentleman stopped and offered directions, seeing that we were looking at a map. He told us the direction to go and then quickly offered to escort us to the museum. As we walked, we talked about our love for his city, Paris. He said he'd visited Chicago a number of times and thought it was a wonderful city. His name is Philippe Jaton. Then we arrived in front of the museum, the Jacquemart-André, and Philippe said, whenever I meet an American, I make a point to say, thank you for saving our country. This was 2025. Here we were, 80 years later, and it was top of mind for this middle-aged gentleman who must have absorbed the stories from his grandfather and his father and incorporated them into his daily consciousness. I accepted his thanks on behalf of my father. I told him about Sam's service and the letters which tell of his everyday experience as a soldier. And Philippe said, oh, you must put these into a book. I said, we did. And I gave him the title and my contact information. After we were back home, I received this text from Philippe. On June 6th, D-Day anniversary. Dear Judith, it is with a profound sense of respect and gratitude that we honor today the memory of so many soldiers and people helping us to liberate from the Nazis on this special day, the 81st anniversary of June 6, 1944. Their commitment up to the supreme sacrifice of their lives oblige us and make us keep the heritage alive and this path of freedom with consistency against the waves of brutal or vicious attacks on our values based on human respect. His words continued. I've been fortunate enough to have the privilege to meet you in the heart of Paris and to have this great conversation in front of the Jacquemart-André Museum. I received this week the book you published with the letters written by your father. Please find here a few pictures. And he attached this wonderful picture celebrating the 81st anniversary in France. Among these two, from the beginning of September 44, close to freed Rims, on top of the Jeep, you may with some difficulty identify a little boy. This is really going to be hard for you to see. It took me a long time to figure it out. But there's a soldier reaching forward, and he's actually got his hands on a child who's wearing something white, so it doesn't really show up well, but you can see the child's legs. That little boy happens to be my father, Philippe wrote, who sent me this picture today for the occasion and for you. Our thanks for him and for all the little boys, little girls, and adults to your people who fought for us and for our common way of life. Avec nos remerciements les plus profonds. Apologies, Bonnie, I know you're here and you heard my French. Hoping to see you again soon, Philippe. Well, Philippe wrote again on June 29th, 2025. Your message brought great joy to both my father and me, reaching across the ocean and across the rainbow of our shared history. I'm currently reading the book and discovered that your father served in the medical corps. Interestingly, my own father told me that the soldier who lifted him onto the car, he was only 4 at the time, belonged to the medical unit. So we smile and think, I don't think that's my father, but the connection is a lovely idea. The letters I've read, he continued, are full of touching details. Both your mother and father come across as deeply thoughtful toward one another, trying to soften the harshness of their circumstances. Beyond mere survival, they were trying to preserve the human connections that form the fabric of society. That, too, was a kind of resistance, a way to protect the soul. I'm truly glad we met in Paris in the spring of 2025 and that a new friendship has begun to blossom. And one more. This continues. Philippe and I go back and forth a lot. On June 6th, my new friend Philippe wrote in part, I'm deeply honored and moved to see how our brief encounter in Paris had resonated so profoundly. It is humbling to realize that a simple gesture, offering directions to 2 Americans, could become part of a larger narrative about connection. I love to share my father's letters by quoting his words, and I love to tell my own stories that grew out of the whole process of finding and reading the letters, editing and publishing the book, connecting and reconnecting with so many people and so much history. All of the experiences emphasize what the fighting really was all about. that we have more in common, more reasons to protect the world all of us humans inhabit. We are more connected than we even know. My father's elegant words say it best. In wartime, friendships which become so sacred to the soldier are broken with utter disregard for the feelings of the men. This, in the larger sense, is necessary, but it is painful, nevertheless. Will men remember those moments of reunion with their children and direct their lives toward a world of peace? Or will they forget again and start fighting each other with the hatred and savagery of wild beasts? And finally, this time, we should learn what war does to young hearts and old, and truly make this a victory to end all wars. Well, on this 250th anniversary of the United States of America, I no longer take our freedom for granted. May the light of freedom come to and from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for sharing. We'll take questions from the auditorium and then see if there are any from Zoom. Raise your hand if you'd like Arnie to give you the microphone.
Oh, goody.
Well,
We have lots of time. Keep them coming.
I was a little boy in the 40s and I had about 10 uncles involved in the war in various, Navy, Army, and they would come through Denver where we lived and stay with us a short period and visit. So I got to know them. But when they traveled all over the world, in all these different countries, they would send me these booklets. I don't know whether any of you remember seeing these, but all these countries in the world had a little book that was like 6x6 and had maps, the history, and the language. And I spent my grade school periods reading those languages, trying to learn all these different languages. I had like various words in 12 languages. Anyway, very interesting.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Would you tell us what happened to your dad after the war?
I'd be happy to. So because he had an actual column daily with the Chicago Daily News, he worked for the Daily News from the time he was about 18, 19 years old. And is that true? Yeah, 20. He actually worked for them for 50 years, from 1928 until they've closed the paper in 1978. So his initial years, he was the theater and music critic, and then he was drafted, and they said, well, we'll keep your job for you, which was supposedly the law. But when he came back, they didn't have the theater and music critic job open anymore. Somebody else was doing it. And so they said, well, movies have become very popular. Be a movie critic. So for the rest of his career, he was the movie and nightlife critic for the Chicago Daily News. So that's what happened to him professionally. His medical training in the Army actually benefited my sister and me because he just had a knack for soothing and healing. And he knew a few tricks, kind of basic home remedy stuff, but he was actually the one, he was the parent that was by the bedside for all our childhood illnesses. He had that love for it, and he used to call the soldiers in his units to whom he administered either dental or psychiatric care, my boys. He was 35. They might have been 18, 19, 20. So they were his boys. Thank you for asking.
Judy, That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Did you happen to see the play in Chicago in Skokie several years ago? I think it was titled Frank and Mary. The woman, I think, needed a pen pal during World War II, and they just happened to pick out Frank. I don't know if those are the right names, but they corresponded, and that made the play, and they ended up getting married. Did you see that play? It was wonderful. Anybody here see that play? Right there. Great.
Okay,
If it
missed
comes
it.
back, you need to see it.
Thank you.
I mean, I have a comment to make. Judy, I have a question. Your presentation was wonderful, and it triggered in me this question that I have for the group.
Good.
How many people here have family members that served in World War II?
Oh, my gosh.
Take
Yeah.
a look. For those on Zoom, I would say that we may have 30, 40 hands up. I want to mention something to you as someone that has been here, a member for 25 years. There was a time, and I know that Don Packard will remember this, when we would ask this audience, how many here served in World War II? We would have 20, 25 hands up. And the one thing that was common with all of them is each of them said something that you mentioned earlier. They didn't want to talk too much about it. But then when they did, what they shared was the real heroes were those that didn't come back. And they just were special people. I guess the silent generation. So I just wanted to share that for the many family members that we raised our hands for those. We'll hear from others from the audience.
Thank you. And that, I will. That makes me want to ask another question. How many of you have stumbled on, found, or knew about letters? Are there any? One person, two. Okay. Have you read them? Yes. Could we have a microphone? Because in the course of doing these talks, both my sister and I have asked that, and people have said, we think there is a box, or yeah, there is a box. Haven't gotten around to it. And then after the talk, they go home and theoretically really read these letters.
Well, my uncle was still single and lived with my mother, my grandma, and great-grandfather at our house when I was little. And he wrote a letter that I have that he sent home, Dear Mama, that talked about all that he had seen through, like and he typed. And he, oh, that's right, they saved the job. He'd worked for National Cash Register. And then when he came back the rest of his life, he worked for National Cash Register. And and he brought me back, I have them on a shelf at home, little wooden shoes that were made in Belgium with my name on it.
You got Ray there? Oh. We'll try again.
Thank you. Your personal experience of the French being indebted to the United States notwithstanding, can you comment on what appears to be a general sense of anti-U.S. sentiment in general and anti-Semitic sentiment in particular that now seems to be growing in France and in Europe?
Yeah. We read, I suppose, basically the same sources. And so that's what we're told and that's what we hear. I can only speak from my happy personal experience that number one, they seem to be friendly enough to a tourist walking down the street. Philippe Jaton was not an outlier. He was not the only friendly person we met. Taxi drivers were gracious and wanted to talk to us and share stories. And we didn't get to meet anyone deeply and have political conversations or know their true thoughts. But you know, what is your experience when you're a tourist? You get a sense, and our sense was, this is a nice place. I mean, maybe they want to give a mic to Bob and he'll have a different view of it. He was on the same trip I was. Yeah, perhaps you could do that. If you have anything to add, Bob. I'm not refuting what you said seems to be
I'm
what
certainly
we.
not going to say anything that's not nice. Somebody should be nice, Bob. It was a wonderful talk. It was a great talk.
Oh, thank
I
you.
really enjoyed hearing it. A couple of comments. One is that if you're drafted at 35, you'll make a miserable line soldier. The smartest thing they did was to put your dad in a hospital in a support position. And the other thing that I would point out is that if you haven't been to the World War II Museum, the National World War II Museum, you really ought to go. It's one of the great museums in the country. I learned things. I mean, I didn't realize that there were actual battles up north in the Bering Straits. I had an uncle who was an air traffic controller there. I never realized what was going on up there. It's a fabulous place, and I recommend it to everyone.
But do you have any comment about the French?
It's in, just want to say it's in New Orleans.
Right.
The French were really friendly.
Yeah.
Paris, as usual, was over touristed. There were too many people. The Jacquemart Museum is fabulous. It's a smaller museum that it doesn't have as many people visiting, beautiful artworks and lovely things to see. My overall impression was very positive everywhere we went.
Thank you. Best we can. Ray?
Well, I really relate to your presentation because my name is Ray. But I want to tell the opposite side of the story. My mother was an early Holocaust survivor. She got out of Germany in 1934 when it was already getting bad, but not that bad. And she came to Chicago through connections with relatives, and she started writing letters back to her sisters, which when her sisters got out at the last minute, 38, 39, they brought these letters back. And we have a collection of them. But the point I want to make is these letters, did you know that in Chicago, not only do they have a water fountain, but you push the button and you could drink the water and it's cold and it's so good and other stuff like that. She just saw so much of the light here as opposed to the darkness that she escaped from.
Those must be wonderful letters.
But it's so inspiring to read them.
Another point I forgot was that uncle, what's I gonna say? Made friends as they were finishing the war with a woman from France. And even though he married a German woman back in the United States, they corresponded through their whole lifetime from France to Chicago.
Two things. First of all, my husband was a prisoner of war in Germany in World War II. And it was my second husband. And he would never discuss this, his children said. But when my granddaughter, who was our granddaughter because we were together before my children were married, she had an assignment to interview a veteran. And she interviewed him, and he gave a two-part thing that we recorded about his experience as a prisoner of war, his experiences in the Army. He was shot down, he was in the Air Force. And so I was able to make a disc and send it to all the grandchildren and his children. It was a 2-hour session that my son-in-law filmed, but this 8th grader who became an engineer gave a really good talk for a 13-year-old, and Al contributed mightily to that. And the second thing is, I just saw the movie The Great Escaper with Michael Caine and Glenda Jackson, and it's about a fellow who was in the Normandy invasion, and he misses the trip, so he leaves his wife in an assisted living facility to go to the reunion. But one of the things when he finally gets there, and they find out, and some newspaper person films him as the great escaper and so on. So it's an interesting kind of thing. But the movie in France, one of the Frenchmen comes up to him and says, "Thank you very much." And that was the same exact thing. And the movie's only 2 years old. But it's amazing what acting Michael Caine and Glenda Jackson do in it.
Artie.
Just a quick word about what's on the table over there. And I so appreciate these comments and questions and sharing. But we do have the book. If you'd like the book, it's available here in hard copy and also an e-version through Amazon, if you prefer reading it that way.
Over here. I'd like to add some comments too about the attitudes towards America as it may still exist. I don't know. In 1977, I made my maiden voyage to Europe. Was concerned about France and their attitude towards us. And what I found, two things were interesting. One, if you attempt to speak to the French in French, changes things dramatically. I was able to capitalize on the 2 years of French I took in high school 20 years prior to that. And my first morning in Paris, I was able to order more coffee, totally in French. I was a hero. But seriously, found that to be, in France, the only time we got jacked around, we were trying to find a restaurant and talked to a couple of gendarmes, and they sent us on a wild goose chase. And the restaurant was located about, maybe 100 feet from where we were when we asked them. On top of that, though, the Netherlands treated us very kindly. 20 years later, I was directing a film for EDS Corporation, which took me to France, took me to Belgium. Belgium, unbelievable. The people, the attitude towards us as Americans because of the liberation. About a month from today, we are going to be making a trip to Holland and to Belgium, and I'm curious to see if that attitude still prevails. But I guess we did some good things, and hopefully our reputation as being pretty good guys will continue to prevail.
Yeah, thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. Not to subtract from your book, but for the audience, there's a parallel book out there. It's called Paper Love. I don't know if anybody have ever heard of it. But what it is, it's the story of a young girl named an author, Sarah Wildman. And her grandfather, it turns out, was a medical student in Vienna in 1938. He graduated, left Vienna, came to Massachusetts, set up practice. He left behind a girlfriend, Valley Sheftel was her name. She was 1 year behind him. She stayed there to finish her training in medical school. Well, the war broke out and she was unable to continue to come to America, but she wrote a series of letters to her boyfriend, the doctor, I forget his name. When he passed away, his granddaughter, the author Sarah, found this package of letters neatly preserved in the attic of his home. They were in German. She had them translated. And what they described was the experience of this young girl in Berlin during the war years. The author then determined whatever happened to Valley. She set out on a very interesting course of investigative journalism to find out what ultimately happened to her and published the whole thing in this book called Paper Love. And I won't tell you the ending of it, but it's the essence of it is the same as yours, a series of old letters giving the experience of the individual and recording history as the way it was. Highly encourage people to look at it.
Myself, go look for it, and thank you.